Revolution. Our strategy. Our condition has been analyzed, our goal perceived, the mechanism has been spelled out, and a set of pathways have been mapped out. Should we simply go counter-economic ourselves, educate ourselves in libertarianism, and inform others by word and deed, we shall reach our libertarian society. Indeed, this is sufficient for most people, and enough to be expected. No new libertarian should ever berate libertarian counter-economists for not doing more. They are agorists and will get there in their own time. But even these simple agorists may wish to contribute to entrepreneurs specializing in accelerating the movement to the agorist society from statism. And others, perceiving rising inflation, heading to economic collapse, or gathering clouds of war, will want something done about it. Finally, the counterattacks of the state, which subvert the agorist sub-society and lure libertarians into false paths, must be combated. These tasks define the field for the new libertarian activists. Again, for those who wish only to live their lives as free as possible and associate with others like-minded, counter-economic libertarianism is sufficient. No more is needed. But for those who want to support in whatever way they can those heroic entrepreneurs who specialize in recruiting for the agora, deal with state-caused catastrophes, and combat statists within and without, a guide is needed to select those who are doing something worthwhile from those spinning their wheels, and those actually counterproductive, i.e., counter-revolutionary, to achieving more freedom. And for those like this author who burn for liberty and wish to devote themselves to that life's work, a strategy is essential. What follows, then, is the new libertarian strategy. The new libertarian activist must keep in mind that actual defense against the state is impossible until the counter-economy has generated the syndicates of protection agencies sufficiently large to defend against the remnants of the state. This will occur only at the phase transition between the third and fourth steps leading back from our statism to agorism. Chapter 3. Each step from statism to agorism requires a different strategy. Tactics will differ, even within each step. There are some rules which apply in all stages. Under all circumstances, one recruits and educates. Given typically confused individual acquaintances who consider a counter-economic act, encourage them to do it. If they are intelligent enough and not likely to turn on you, explain risks involved and return expected. Most of all, educate them by your example to the extent you can let them know. All library libertarians you know, those who profess some theoretical variant of libertarianism but eschew practice, should be encouraged to practice what they preach. Scorn their inaction and praise their first halting steps towards counter-economics. Interact with them more and more as trust grows with their competence and experience. Those already in counter-economics whom you meet can be let in on the libertarian philosophy that you hold, that mysterious belief you hold which keeps you so happy and free of guilt. Drop it nonchalantly if they feign lack of interest, and wax enthusiastically as they grow more curious and eager to learn. Self-agorism, by example, in argument. Control and program your emotional reactions to exhibit hostility at statism and deviationism, and to exhibit enthusiasm and joy at agorist acts and the state's setbacks. Most of these tactics will come with routine, but you can check yourself to polish a few things. Finally, coordinate your activities with other new libertarian activists. At this point, we arrive at the need for group tactics and organization. Many worthy libertarians argue that the market structures of business, partnerships, and joint stock companies provide all the organization necessary or desirable, save maybe for personal mating or socializing. In one sense, they are correct, in that all structures must be market compatible or be inconsistent with agorism. In another sense, they are guilty of a lack of imagination and the concern of form over substance. In an agorist society, division of labor and self-respect of each worker, capitalist, entrepreneur will probably eliminate the traditional business organization, especially the corporate hierarchy, in imitation of the state and not the market. Most companies will be associations of independent contractors, consultants, and other companies. Many may be just one entrepreneur and all his services, computers, suppliers, and customers. This mode of operation is already around and growing in the freer segments of Western economies. Thus, an association of entrepreneurs of liberty for the purpose of specializing, coordinating, and delivering libertarian activities is no violation of the market and may well be optimal. The traditional name for a handling together of sovereign units for a goal and then disbanding is an alliance. Hence, the basic organization for New Libertarian activists is the New Libertarian Alliance. The organization of the New Libertarian Alliance, or NLAs, is simple and should avoid turning into a political organ or even an authoritarian organization. Rather than officers, what are needed are tacticians, local coordinators with competency in tactical planning, and strategists, regional coordinators with competency in strategic thinking. A new libertarian ally does not follow a tactician or strategist, but rather buys their argument and expertise. Anyone offering a better plan can replace the previous planner. Tactics and strategy should be bought and sold by the allies, like any other commodity, in consistent agorist fashion. Even though these labels are borrowed from military history and do correspond to a form of combat, never forget that actual physical confrontation with the state's enforcers must await the market's generation of protection agency syndicates of sufficient strength. All else is premature. What is the global strategy, continental strategy, and local tactics for an NLA to optimally pursue? Again, let's look at the 4 steps from, or to, agora from statism. The first 3 are actually rather artificial divisions. No abrupt change occurs from first to second to third. As will be shown, it is most probable that the transition from the 3rd to 4th step will be quite sudden, though it is not required by the nature of the agora. Rather, the convulsion will be caused by the nature of the state. In fact, all violence, unrest, instability, and dislocations are caused by the state, never fomented by new libertarians. Heed well, you who would be a paladin of liberty. Never initiate any act of violence, regardless of how likely a libertarian result may appear. To do so is to reduce yourself to a status. There are no exceptions to this rule. Either you are fundamentally consistent or not. A new libertarian is fundamentally consistent, and one who is not fundamentally consistent is not a new libertarian. But using new libertarian analysis, one can predict the likely outbreak of statist aggression and move to head it off by exposure or even defend or evacuate the victims. One can also predict the probable outcomes of deviations by libertarian groups and either head off the sellouts and disasters or win respect for one's foresight and that of new libertarianism from potential recruits. Let the state be the forest fire. The New Libertarian Alliance are the smoke eaters, who know how it burns, how to fire break, how the winds of change affect it, where the sparks may fly, and finally, how to extinguish it. With this in mind, let us label the steps to agora as 4 phases and outline the appropriate strategy for each. Phase 0. Zero-density agorist society. In this phase, most of human history, no agorists exist, only scattered libertarians or proto-libertarians thinking and practicing counter-economics. The moment someone reads this manifesto and wishes to apply it, we have moved to the next phase. All that can be done in phase 0 is slow evolution of consciousness, hidden misdevelopment, and a lot of frustrating dichotomies. Until you, the first agorist in a phase 0 situation, have added to your number, your only strategy can be to increase your numbers as well as live counter-economically yourself. The best form of organization is a libertarian alliance, in which you steer the members from political activity, where they have blindly gone seeking relief from oppression, and focus on education, publicity, recruitment, and perhaps some anti-political campaigning, i.e., vote for nobody, none of the above, boycott the ballot, don't vote, it only encourages them, etc., to publicize the libertarian alternative. A libertarian alliance may take stands on issues agreed on, but insist on unanimity. Only the most clearly libertarian stands will be taken, and you can always veto a deviationist stance. Always encourage tendencies towards hardcore, that is, consistent position, and scorn softcore, that is, inconsistent ones. Phase 1. Low-density agorist society. The first counter-economic libertarians appear in this phase, and the first serious splits in the libertarian movement occur. Since few libertarians are very consistent yet, deviationism will run rife and tend to overwhelm activism. Get liberty quick schemes from anarcho-Zionism, that is, running away to a promised land of liberty, to political opportunism will seduce the impatient and sway the incompletely informed. All will fail if for no other reason than liberty grows individual by individual. Mass conversion is impossible. There is one exception: radicalization by statist attack against a collective. Even so, it requires entrepreneurs of liberty to have sufficiently informed the persecuted collective so that they laze coherently libertarian-ward, rather than scatter randomly or worse, flow into out-of-power statism. These crises of statism are spontaneous and predictable, but cannot be caused by moral, consistent libertarians. The strategy of the first new libertarians is to combat anti-principles, which strengthen the state and dissipate anarchist energy uselessly. The general strategy outlines previously applies. Get libertarians into counter-economics, and get the most active of the agorists to get counter-economists into libertarianism. The proto-new libertarians may work within existing organizations and clubs of libertarians as radical caucuses, ginger groups, or as a libertarian left faction in general. A new libertarian alliance is premature here because it is not yet self-sustaining. What can be successfully built is, under whatever label seems most conducive for recruitment, a movement of the libertarian left. Such a movement is itself a mixed bag of individuals of varying hardness of core, but they are tending or moving towards the ideal of new libertarianism. Even within the movement of the libertarian left, structure should be de-emphasized. The most new libertarian will be the most competent to coordinate and plan. That is, those of highest understanding and practice of agorism and greatest zeal for action will naturally direct resources. Each movement of the libertarian lefter, like each new libertarian ally, spins his or her own outsources and decides whether or not to accept a tactician or strategist's advice and planning, as any entrepreneur would do with any informed consultant. Some pseudo-political public trappings may be necessary to utilize public forums and media access. Also, most people will not understand your market organization unless you translate it in pseudo-political terminology and back again. At this point, in the latter stages of Phase 1, and with the functioning movement of the libertarian left large enough, these hardcore dedicated cadre can apply leverage to sway larger groups of semi-converted quasi-libertarians to actually block marginal actions by the state. This is a high expenditure, quick gain, but low long-range yield tactic and should be rare. It will be covered later. Basically, stave off war and mass extermination of libertarians. Following all these activities, radicalizing the libertarians and evolving the new libertarian alliance. That is all one can accomplish. Phase 2. Mid-density, small condensation agorist society. At this point, the statists take notice of agorism. While before libertarians could be manipulated by one ruling faction to the detriment of another, sort of an anti-market competition, played with ballots and bullets rather than innovation and pricing, they will start to be perceived as a threat. Pogroms, that is mass arrests, may even occur, although that is unlikely. Remember, most agorists are embedded in the rest of society, and associating with them are partially converted libertarians and counter-economists. In order to reach this phase, the entire society has been contaminated by agorism to a degree. Thus, it is now possible for the first ghettos or districts of agorists to appear and count on the sympathy of the rest of society to restrain the state from a mass attack. These communities, whether above or underground, can now sustain the New Libertarian Alliance. New Libertarian Alliance acts as spokesman for the agora with the statist society, using every chance to publicize the superiority of agorist living to statist inhabiting, and perhaps argue for tolerance of those with different ways. In this phase, the agorist society is vulnerable to statist regression of the populace. Thus, the agorists, whether visible or not, have a high incentive to at least maintain the present level of libertarian consciousness among the rest of the populace. This being done most expertly by the New Libertarian Alliance. One way to define who the New Libertarian Alliance is at this phase. The New Libertarian Alliance has its sustenance and its mission. But in addition to defending the agorist subsociety, it can work towards accelerating the next evolutionary step. Phase 3. High-density, large condensation agorist society. In this phase, the state moves into a series of terminal crises, somewhat analogous to the well-known Marxist scenario, but with different causes. In this case, real ones. Fortunately, the potential for damage has been drastically decreased by the sapping of the state's resources and coercion of its authority by the growth of the counter-economy. In fact, as the resources of the economy approach equality between the state and agora, the state is pushed into crisis. Wars and rapid inflation with depressions and crack-ups become perpetual as the state attempts to redeem its authority. It may be possible to reverse its decline by corrupting the agora with deductive anti-principles. So the New Libertarian Alliance's first task is clear: to maintain vigilance and purity of thought. In this phase, the New Libertarian Alliance may no longer hold either label or much of its old form. The most motivated New Libertarians will move into the research and development supply for the budding agorist protection and arbitration agencies, and lastly, as directors of the protection company syndicates. The situation now approaches revolution, but is still reversible. Again, the New Libertarians are in the forefront of maintaining and defending gains to this point. But looking ahead to the next phase, the New Libertarian Alliance, now just a collective term for the most forward-looking elements, can accelerate the process by discovering and developing the optimal methods of protection and defense, both by word and deed, for their industry and entrepreneuring its innovations. At this phase, transition between 3 and 4, we have the last unleashing of violence by the ruling class of the state to suppress those elements that would bring them to justice for all past state crimes. The state's intellectuals perceive that its authority has failed and all will be lost. Things must be reversed now or never. The New Libertarian Alliance must prevent premature awareness of this status or premature action on this awareness. This is the final strategic goal of the New Libertarian Alliance. When the state unleashes its final wave of suppression and is successfully resisted, this is the definition of revolution. Once realization has occurred that the state no longer can plunder and pay off its parasitical class, the enforcers will switch sides to those better able to pay them, and the state will rapidly implode into a series of pockets of statism in backward areas, if any. Phase 4. Agorist Society with Statist Impurities. The collapse of the state leaves only mopping up operations. Since the insurance and protection companies see no state to defend against, the syndicate of allied protectors collapses into competition, and the New Libertarian Alliance, its support gone, dissolves. Statists apprehended pay restoration, and if they live long enough to discharge their debts, are reintegrated as productive entrepreneurs. Their training comes automatically as they work off their debt. We're home. Chapter 2. New libertarianism is taken for granted as the basis of ordinary life, and we tackle the other problems facing mankind.